Terry McLaurin will be playing with yet another new starting quarterback. But the good news is that he's quarterback proof. And rookie Jayden Daniels might be the best quarterback he has played with. We dig into the 2024 fantasy outlook for the entire Washington Commanders offense on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, betting, all the good off-season storylines with sportingnews.com, and looking forward to talking about our last NFC East team, the Washington Commanders, today.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Yes, we're going through the Washington Commanders today. We're going through all 32 NFL teams, giving them each their own episode and digging through all of their offensive players and their fantasy outlook next year. So we've already gone through all of the NFC West and NFC North teams. We've hit on 3 of the NFC East teams and finishing off with the Washington Commanders for the NFC East today. The Commanders last year, not great, right? My boy Sam Howell, he was okay for the first half of the year, fell apart the second half. Points per game, 25th in the NFL, 31st in fantasy points per game, only scored more fantasy points per game than the Patriots last year. The Commanders move on from Sam Howell. They trade him away to Seattle. They draft Jayden Daniels with the second overall pick. They change out their OC. They hire Kliff Kingsbury. They add Austin Ekeler. They draft Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round. They add tight end Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott. They did lose Antonio Gibson and Curtis Samuel, right? So a lot of changes in this offense, I should say. But let's start at the top because everything is going to run through and depend on Jayden Daniels. Like, he's going to be the starter this year. You would expect immediately because it's only him and Marcus Mariota. Right now, Jayden Daniels, he's ranked as the quarterback 16 in average draft position right now. So is that too low for a guy that's such a good runner and has a big arm, or is that fair because he's a rookie and we're a little bit more nervous?
Yeah, when we saw the Commanders last take a quarterback, a number 2 overall, it was 12 years ago with Robert Griffin III. He ended up in points per game as the QB1. Remember, he went nuts running and passing, and he was fantastic as a fantasy asset his rookie year. Then he had the knee issues, and that was it. And it was over for him, but he finished all the way up as the QB1. Now, an interesting note as well, in terms of points per game, with Kliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray in 2019, when he was the number 1 overall pick, was up there at QB7. So this Kliff Kingsbury style of offense and a running quarterback is very conducive to fantasy points. Now, they do have a concern on the offensive line. That's the biggest concern, but you also have some decent weapons, and they're kind of short to intermediate upgrades here. You have Austin Ekeler. We know Brian Robinson Jr. is not a bad out receiver. We talked about Ertz and Snutt. The new look at tight end minus Logan Thomas. Kliff Kingsbury also got one Luke McCaffrey to help replace Curtis Samuel. Still have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. So putting all those cards out on the table here for Jayden Daniels. He's looked good so far. And right now, he's couple spots behind his fellow first-round high pick, number 1 overall, Caleb Williams, who went to the Bears. So very interesting there, but I think he has a high running floor. The weapons are good enough. Kingsbury's offense and running quarterback offenses tend to be very fruitful for rookies right away. So I think we're maybe underselling him. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think it's for certain that Williams will be the highest scoring rookie quarterback. I'll just say that. Daniels is a real good threat to pass him because he's just a more dynamic runner. He could just take off and run a lot more with Kingsbury than we do see what Williams does over there with Shane Waldron and the Bears. So again, I'm feeling this is a very good value. Now, if I see these guys and their value, Williams at 14, I'm probably going to give away one of my answers here. Williams at 14, Daniels at 16. I'm going to take Daniels every time because, again, I think the rushing can really put him over the top here.
Yeah, that's the big focus here, right? It's the rushing. So the top 3 fantasy quarterbacks last year were 3 of the 4 quarterbacks that had 500 plus rushing yards last year. It was Allen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. The other quarterback that had 500 more rushing yards was Justin Fields. He had an up and down fantasy year, but I think that's pretty much the floor you're looking at with Jayden Daniels, right?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have to be a good NFL quarterback to be a good fantasy quarterback. He led FBS quarterbacks last year with 1,134 rushing yards. He led the FBS among all players in yards per carry at 8.4. He had the second most rushing yards per game among all players in the SEC last year, and he's a quarterback. He averaged
Yeah.
90.5 rushing yards per game. But also, one little fun nugget is that Daniels is one of 6 Power 5 quarterbacks to have at least 1,000 rushing yards and 30 passing touchdowns in a single season since 2000, as far back as my data goes. But the others were Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, and Cam Newton. Now, these are all college seasons, right? Those are the only guys to do it in college in a season. And Jayden Daniels is joining that group. Everyone I just mentioned in that group has been a fantastic fantasy quarterback. So I don't know. They've all each of those guys also had at least 500 rushing yards in their first season as a starter in the NFL, with Hurts and Jackson and Newton putting up way more than that. So I just expect him to have great rushing numbers, which means he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we're just a little bit worried that he's not 100% been named the starter. That's why everyone's a little bit kind of tepid about that. But again, Marcus Mariota is not a bridge quarterback. He's now proved that he is pretty much a straight up backup.
Yeah.
And he's going to be helpful because he's a guy that's willing to be in that role. I think his last shot came in Atlanta. So you don't need to worry about him. I think the one concern you have is he's very inconsistent as a passer. He's going to be really dependent on the deep ball game a little bit, maybe, and not have the short intermediate come through. But that's why I think they forced him into that with Ekeler, since not that he's going to have to throw underneath to these guys to get involved. So yeah, I think we're being very conservative with him and Caleb Williams with their numbers right now. And we know why, because we've talked about it. Michelle's broken down quite a bit that it's very anomalous for a rookie quarterback to be very good in fantasy. I mean, CJ Stroud is a very great exception from last year. Not typically, okay, we're due 1 or 2 of these guys to do this every year. But that said, some of the kind of the pendulum was swinging. We mentioned some of those guys. I talked about it before, that Hurts and Newton. Some of these guys only since 2011 have been getting it done as quarterbacks. You throw in, of course, Lamar in his first full season and RG3, as I mentioned. So these seasons are becoming less anomalous. That said, they were still a concern, especially to sustain 2 rookie quarterbacks here. So maybe it makes us pause. But we also ended 2 back-to-back Heisman quarterbacks with a high upside and arm and rushing ability come in the league at the same time with good offensive systems and great support. So I think they could blow it up here. And I'm really excited to see what can happen. I just think QB 16 right now, it's going to keep going up, I think, for him. I don't know. I think Williams will probably taper off, but I think Daniels is still headed up here in his ranking.
As it should be, because right now, what makes zero sense to me is we're seeing Anthony Richardson at 51 overall,
Yeah.
and Jayden Daniels at 107, 56 picks after Anthony Richardson. To me, they have the same exact upside and the same exact.
Yeah.
We've seen Anthony Richard play now 2 full games. That is it. Like we
Yeah.
don't know what he is either. We know he has a rushing upside. It's the same exact thing for Jayden Daniels. So I mean, if I get 150 picks later, I'm just taking the chance on Daniels. It's not to say I like him more than Anthony Richardson, but there's just no way I'm paying 50 picks higher for the same exact upside and risk. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, for sure. And this is probably what I'll do. And I'm not going to keep it very much secret. I'm going to go after these rookie quarterbacks at different stages in the draft, whether I'm in 1 QB league or 2 QB league. If I'm in 1 QB, I'll probably go after Williams or Daniels for the value. If I'm 2 QB, I might go after or in Dynasty, I might go after someone who might start later in the season, like a McCarthy, or if I even have any belief in Bo Nix, I might go in that direction. But if I'm going for 1 QB, I'm going to target a lot of Williams and Daniels because I know some people will be afraid about their rookie status. But again, they profile in the offenses they're in and their rushing ability, and Daniels definitely has a little bit more of that even than Williams.
They close up the Jayden Daniels talk here. Rank these 3 guys. They're all going in at about 10 picks of each other.
Okay.
You have Trevor Lawrence going into
Okay.
his 4th year now. Kirk Cousins going into his 100th year, or Jayden Daniels. So Trevor Lawrence, Jayden Daniels, Kirk Cousins. Rank those in the order of that you would want them to be your starting quarterback this year in fantasy.
I think I go Jayden Daniels, Kirk Cousins, and Lawrence because, again, Daniels with the running, Cousins, the production is there. Lawrence gives me the biggest concerns for sure with his production from last year.
Absolutely. We in our next segment, Terry McLaurin. I mean, this dude just has to keep playing with different wide receivers, and he does get it done, right? Just not the touchdown so much. So he has been struggling for fantasy to hit that high ceiling. But we're going to discuss if we think he can hit that top 12, top 15 ceiling this year with Jayden Daniels. We'll get into all of that good stuff right after the break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. I personally use this app so many times, especially when I lived in Pittsburgh, lived right down the street from the Steelers Stadium, and would hop on the app on Sunday mornings and buy tickets. And because they just were such an easy app to use, and I knew they always had my back. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So last year, Terry McLaurin, very up and down season, right? But do you put that more on Sam Howell or do you put it more on Terry McLaurin? Because whenever Jacoby Brissett came into the game, it was all of a sudden, I mean, I think he had like 5 targets from Brissett and put up like over 100 something yards with him, a touchdown. Like it was just like deep reception after deep reception with Jacoby Brissett, but that was never getting done with Howell. So what do you expect from Terry McLaurin this year? And do you think he's being drafted a bit too low just because of that, disappointing year last season?
Yeah, he's one of the highest paid and most productive receivers in the NFL. And it was clear that him and Sam Howell were never on the same page. Howell seemed to feel a little bit more Jahan Dotson, but then Howell's own shortcomings didn't really get it done with anybody. As we got late into the season, he got beat up. He was just running around trying to make plays. And I think most quarterbacks, even going back to Taylor Heineke, they realized that McLaurin is the alpha and should get the ball all over the field. And the one thing that has been missing consistently is his touchdowns. They haven't used him a lot in the red zone, but I think that could also go up here. And again, I didn't mention we talked about CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys on Monday and the DeAndre Hopkins comparisons here. Well, I think Terry McLaurin could be the DeAndre Hopkins of this Kliff Kingsbury offense in terms of how they use him just all over the field, have a rookie quarterback. They already got excited when McLaurin was able to attach to Daniels. So this is really low for him. I know last year, I don't get this at all. He was wide receiver 32 and the 42 on average. So really he was not a valuable, consistent wide receiver 3 in the top 36 at all. But how does his number just go up to wide receiver 32 in the rankings this year? Like, it doesn't make any sense that he would go up one spot. Easy in the bucket, 130 targets are coming for him. So this is what this guy puts up. That's kind of very consistent here. I look at him as a wide receiver 2. I think that's where the numbers pile up in the top 24. He's that good of a player. I think everyone just forgets. And again, this is where you have to take advantage. I think part of it is like, when we're looking at the rankings from the industry or average draft position, where it's like, oh, this is the same old Commanders. This is not the same old Commanders. They've borrowed from the 49ers in their front office. They have a new owner. They're trying to win. They've got an exciting offensive coordinator for the first time in a while. It's not Scott Turner. Eric Bieniemy didn't ever work out, personality clash. But now you have Kliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn. They're on the same page. It's fine. Terry McLaurin is going to be great this year. So, again, this guy's been kind of asking for this type of quarterback for a while. I don't think he's going to disappoint. So
Yeah, I
I
don't know
think
if I'm
he's one of the
as
best
high
values
on
on the board.
him. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm as high on him as you are, but I do expect him to have a really solid year. He's accounted for the highest team percentage of receiving yards in the league since entering the league in 2019. 28% of the Commanders' receiving yards he's made up since 2019. He's going to do that again, right? Like he's going to be
Yeah.
the clear cut top target. Curtis Samuel's also gone, so that might even give him more targets. What's really fun is that McLaurin can become the first player to have 5 straight seasons with 1,000+ receiving yards at any point in his career, each coming from a different primary starting quarterback, right? Because it's just every year this dude has a new starting quarterback. Also, a fun little note here, McLaurin has caught a pass touchdown from 10 different quarterbacks in his 5-season career. That's tied for the most by any player with 5,000+ receiving yards in the first 5 seasons all time. That's tied with DeAndre Hopkins and DJ Moore. Both Hopkins and DJ Moore had career high receiving yards in their 6th season, which is what McLaurin is going into. I just thought that was a fun little
Yeah.
coincidence there.
It's the same thing. You
But
got a quarterback for those guys, right? We got Hopkins with Kyler Murray. We got Moore with the Justin Fields chemistry, and we saw it took it off. So, I mean,
my
that's
big
really
question
good for
though
McLaurin.
for you though, Vinny, is the touchdowns, right? Because he's not
Yeah.
been a touchdown scorer. 4, 5, 5,
Yeah.
4. Those are his touchdown numbers over the last 4 seasons. Jayden Daniels coming in as a rookie, a guy that probably is not going to throw a lot of passing touchdowns. What do you think is a realistic number for Terry McLaurin to catch for receiving touchdowns?
I think I'll go 6 to 7. I think that's fair. I mean, touchdowns are hard to project beyond that. I think he will get a little more red zone usage and some goal line targets that didn't come before. Because again, rookie quarterback, he's probably going to treat him as a security blanket all over the field. So that also helps a little bit more. I mean, a lot of the quarterbacks we've had before have been kind of young veterans or veterans who are kind of not maybe locked into one guy. I think you might see Daniels do that a little bit more in the red zone.
So when you're looking at ADP here, there's a 10 pick span where all these wide receivers are going. It goes in this order of ADP right now. It goes Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Jayden Reed, who's our boy, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Hollywood Brown. I'll say if I get to my pick and Jayden Reed is not there, he's already off the board. I would much prefer Terry McLaurin over all those rest of the guys, like really easily. But if Jayden Reed was sitting there, I think I might go Jayden Reed. It would be a close call. Would
Yeah,
McLaurin be your favorite out of this group?
I think it'd be close between McLaurin and Reed, but I would go McLaurin again because he's a little bit more experienced as the veteran alpha. And Keenan Allen is also going somewhere in this range. A lot of people are into Keenan Allen because of the Bears connection and what he did last year. But I think McLaurin is a lot more appealing to me in his offense with a rookie quarterback. So I don't know. Terry McLaurin, don't be scared of Terry McLaurin. Think he's going to be scary, Terry. I mean, he's going to be back this year. He's that good of a receiver. Let's remember that. And finally, like the Hopkins, like the Moore, he gets unlocked in the right place.
Yeah, I might take yeah, I don't know. It's so close with McLaurin and Reed. I think McLaurin's obviously the much better wide receiver right now and just where they at in their careers. I just feel a lot more safe with Jordan Love at quarterback than
Right.
Jayden Daniels. Like
That's fair.
I really like the idea of Jayden Daniels as a fantasy quarterback with his rushing. I don't know how much he's going to be able to support a wide receiver with the touchdowns, especially. But you do know whatever those passing yards are that Daniels does have, the majority of them are going to come from Terry McLaurin. So I do think he's a really nice value this year. Do you have any interest in Jahan Dotson? I say we, it was mostly me. Was I just too high on him last year? And now I'm, kind of pushing him away this year. Maybe he can be that, post-hype sleeper. Any interest in him now that Curtis Samuel is out and maybe he gets his targets and he has a new OC too. So he could be used more.
Yeah, and it really is like the Cowboy situation where we had CeeDee Lamb going really high and then a big difference, and even Brand Cooks is buried lower than where Dotson is here. But wide receiver 61 is where he's at the board, 137 overall. I think he's got some upside as a big play receiver there. I'm not going to say if I have McLaurin, I want to go after Dotson, but here's some guys that you might see down there that and Michelle, you might be interested in Dotson over these guys: Jerry Jeudy, Gabe Davis, Josh Palmer, Adam Thielen, Rashid Shaheed, and Khalil Shakir. I think the only person there that kind of interests me, or really two, that might surprise you are Josh Palmer and Rashid Shaheed. Those are the only two guys that I would maybe consider over Dotson. But why would you want Jerry Jeudy at this point over Dotson? He has got way more upside here. So again, I think people are a little bit scared. Commanders, just a bad taste in their mouth about this offense, but don't be scared. They're going to turn the corner. Dotson, however, it's probably going to be rather inconsistent, kind of as the deep threat in this offense that he was meant to be.
Yeah, I think Dotson could maybe be a sneaky grab there that late. Like you mentioned, like out of all those guys, yeah, I would go with Josh Palmer just because he could seriously be the wide receiver one for Justin Herbert. We don't know yet. So I would take the shot with him over Dotson. But after that, I'm happy with Dotson in that range just to take a shot. And yeah, maybe I'll be dropping him really soon in the season, but you're going to be dropping guys and using the waivers anyways. Any interest in Luke McCaffrey, and if you're in a very deep league, to take him to hope for, maybe a Curtis Samuel type role, or maybe he just ends up being like his brother and balling out. Probably not, but he is super fresh to the position, only played wide receiver 2 years so far. So I think he does have potential. I just don't know about in his rookie season. Maybe more of like a dynasty stash for Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel, where he finished last year, was wide receiver 46 in terms of the average points per game, wide receiver 53, so well off the radar. He was wide receiver 5, and I don't think McCaffrey can be seen as higher than that because it's a different style of offense. And don't forget, we got more factors at tight ends as well this year, so something to think about. That'll be a good transition to our last segment. But Luke McCaffrey definitely interests me as a dynasty league stash because I think there's some upside to watch there in this offense, especially if Dotson starts to disappoint and they need McCaffrey to do the job kind of as a young number 2 inside. So a lot of fun stuff to watch in this Commanders offense. I think there's going to be a lot more scoring. They can only go up from what they had last year. So I'm excited to see what they can do. And we will look also some things we have to figure out with the backfield with Austin Ekeler and a tight end with Zach Ertz. Will the youngsters have more appeal there? We will break that down in our final segment. All right. You know that you can get overwhelmed by the noise on TV, but if you just wanted to have smart sports talk for you, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. It's time to close the show looking at our Commanders take here. Austin Ekeler has joined the Commanders. He had Brian Robinson, who was very good last year in the backfield. He gets swapped out for his backfield mate here with no more Antonio Gibson. He goes to New England. B-Rob was wide receiver 22 last year, 21. So however you look at it, he was a solid RB2 in half-point PPR. Gibson, this is what Ekeler comes to right now, was wide receiver or running back 45, 47. Now, right now, the take is that Ekeler is going to be lead back, Michelle. So I don't know if I totally believe this at all with Ekeler and Robinson. I still think I would lean more Robinson this year.
I don't really want to lean either one. But yeah, I don't know if I believe that Ekeler is going to be like the true lead back. Maybe technically at the end of the year, he has a few more touches with him, but Eckler's never hit 1,000 rushing yards in a season in his career. He's had sub 700 rushing yards in 5 of his 7 seasons. His efficiency went down like crazy last year. Average a career low 4.6 yards per touch when he was at 5.4 from 2021 through 2022. And then also we saw the touchdowns come crumbling down, right? Like he was so dominant for fantasy because this dude scored so many touchdowns and then he only scored 6 last year. And that was the biggest difference with him because he's never like been super efficient on the ground or anything. This is the worry though. How much will the Commanders be scoring with a rookie quarterback in general? Like how many opportunities will there be around the goal line and how many will Brian Robinson take away from him? Because there really wasn't any running backs on the Chargers you could trust around the goal line. And Brian Robinson, you can. And then also the targets have been such a big part of his game. And if Jayden Daniels is that mobile quarterback, we know they don't technically check down too often. I just don't think he's going to be seeing as many targets as we need him to see to get back to what Austin Ekeler used to be. I think I'm staying away from this backfield. Brian Robinson Jr. was just like, he's fine. It's nothing exciting for fantasy. He doesn't really ever win you weeks. The Commanders average a league low 21 carries per game last year. I know it's a different OC. Maybe they run more, especially, but I think if they run more, those are going to be because of Jayden Daniels. So I'm not necessarily excited about this backfield.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, this could be a backfield to avoid, but some interesting numbers here on the rankings. I mean, Robinson's RB 29, 88 overall. Ekeler is ranked behind him at RB 33, 101 overall. But in terms of ADP, Eckler's going the top 195. Robinson is going later at 108. So, what does that say? A split between drafters in the industry, right? And the industry's are realizing that Brian Robinson's a little bit better. RB 29 is only a few spots dropped off from last year. I will also go back to Kliff Kingsbury here with Kyler Murray. That was a pretty effective rushing team with the Cardinals in the rookie season. You had Kenyon Drake. Yep, that was this one season of Kenyon Drake in Arizona being really good. He was RB 16 with the rookie Kyler Murray. So keep that in mind. There's a little bit of opportunity here. And you're right, with the checkdowns, we've seen a correlation between running young quarterbacks. They don't check down as much. They are legs or the check down, right? So Brian Robinson is probably going to get the key carries. It's probably going to be a bit touchdown dependent to see if he can pay off as an RB2 here. We'll see what his receiving load is. He's a capable receiver. It's just that Eckler's there, and he might take away a lot of that key spot, but so did Gibson. So I wouldn't get too excited. I think RB16, he's not going to finish where Drake did, but finishing around RB2 in the higher end flex, I think that's in the range of Robinson. But definitely, I'm not interested in Ekeler. The only back I would want is Robinson.
Yeah, I'm with you with that. And then looking at their tight ends, they bring in Zach Ertz. He's getting older and older, turns 34 in November, right? And he didn't really do anything last year. Tight end 23 on average. He had a pretty solid 2022 fantasy season because of the receptions he was getting with Kyler Murray and just in that Cardinals offense in general. But then you didn't see that in 2023 at all. They did draft Benson Knott rather early this year. But again, a rookie tight end with a rookie quarterback. Like I know we saw Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid last year. I do not expect this to be Ben Sinnott in this offense. I think all the targets are going to Terry McLaurin. And if anyone else breaks out or is able to put up any somewhat reliable fantasy contribution, it would be Jahan Dotson. I'm not going to buy into the tight ends here. What about you?
Yeah, Ertz is also breaking down. I'm really surprised that he's coming back again. I mean, his wife, Julie, is hung it up here from her soccer playing career. I thought, okay, he's going to hang it up at the same time. They can enjoy retirement together with all their money. But he's 34. He's coming back for more, maybe as a request to Kliff Kingsbury. And this is the same thing we saw just a couple of years ago, right? With Ertz and Trey McBride. We know McBride was the upside guy. Ertz was hanging around. Ertz was valuable for a bit, but then he broke down, opened the door for McBride the very next season. So this could definitely happen again, except Ertz could be less reliable to stay on the field. He's older. He's broken down a little bit more. So that's a little sneaky sleeper. Again, I don't see the fortunes of rookie tight ends being as good as they were last year, but he might have some value as a streamer at some point, especially if Ertz gets hurt here. And there's some history here with tight ends. I mean, it's a little bit up and down with Kingsbury, but that year with Ertz and a rookie McBride, it definitely was a big factor. So something you have to keep in mind there from Arizona. But again, am I going to go after either of these players? No, but I really like Ben Sinnott in a situation where dynasty leagues looking a little bit farther again with a potential streamer, maybe he has some value here. But yeah, I think where you'll see Ben Sinnott and his value is when I would expect Ertz to retire in 2025, and then he takes over that key tight end spot there. And maybe you'll just have going forward McLaurin, Dotson, and then McCaffrey and Sinnott as the key targets here for McDaniel. So it should be a lot of fun to watch. But again, no interest in Commanders tight ends in the short term redraft leagues.
Yep, I'm with you. Ben Sinnott, maybe we'll talk about him next year at this time, but I just really don't think we're going to be mentioning his name too much in 2024. That is it for today's show. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, we will be moving on to the NFC South. We'll be talking about the Atlanta Falcons on our next episode. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.